So after a big 2 weeks in Miami, and of course the Sunshine Double in general being the whole of March, we have a lot of change in the rankings. And it feels like Miami, a lot of lower ranked players did really well. So let's have a look at who won last week and then go from there. All right, so starting with the players that won last week in Miami, of course, on the women's side, it was Sabalenka taking up Pegula in straight sets, 7-5, 6-2 to lift her first Miami trophy. And Mensik beating Djokovic in the final, 7-6, 7-6 to lift his first trophy and get a huge win and a huge boost up the rankings. Let's have a look at the players outside the top 10 that got a boost in the rankings this week. Starting with Raducanu, she went up 12 spots, number 48 in the world, after making the quarterfinals. Eala, of course, the massive story on the women's side, she went up 65 spots to 75 in the world. Of course, career high for her, and she is now eligible to play in the main draw of slams without having to play qualifiers. And Mensik, he went up to number 24 in the world, which is 30 spots higher than last week, a career high for him for winning the tournament. So it was a week for the teenagers in the rankings, going up massively to career high rankings. Players that dropped down the rankings outside the top 10. Collins, she won last year in Miami. Unfortunately, couldn't replicate that. Lost 7 spots down to 22 in the world. Zachary, she went down 13 spots, number 64 in the world. And Jarry, he went down 11 spots, number 58 in the world, after all performing poorly this week. So, some familiar names there, dropping down the rankings over the last few weeks. Just not able to do what they did this time last year. I'll start on the WTA side of things, and no change at the top with Sabalenka at 1 and Swiatek at 2. Gauff at 3 and Pegula at 4. Keys comes in at 5, but there was a bit of a change in the bottom half with Paolini going up 1 spot, pushing Andreeva down to number 7. So Paolini at 6 and Andreeva at 7. Zhang went up to number 8, with Badosa going up to number 9. Rybakina drops down 2 spots to number 10. And Navarro falls out of the top 10 completely. So really interesting there to see. We've got sort of the top 11, or more specifically, the players from 8 to 11, really close in the rankings. So with the clay court season starting, expect there to be more changes for people dropping out of the top 10 and coming back into the top 10 over the next few weeks. Looking at the race of the finals now, and after a big tournament, we're always going to see some changes, and we have a change at the top, with Sabalenka going up to number 1, pushing Keys down to number 2 after winning in Miami. So I guess you could say that Sabalenka over the first 3 months of the year has been the best player when it comes to ranking. Andreeva, she stays at number 3 with Swiatek at 4. Pegula, she goes up 3 spots to number 5 in the race of the finals after making the final. Townsend stays at 6 with Rybakina falling 2 spots down to number 7. Anisimova got a boost up to number 8, but also went up also into number 9. Navarro going down to number 10, and Bencic falling out of the top 10 completely. So we're starting to see a really interesting group of players now, and probably a lot of these players are going to make the top 8. I know we've got a long way to go, but a lot of those names in that top 8 we expect to be at the end of the year, or maybe a couple of names there that we could switch, but the majority of those we're expecting to make the WTA Finals at the end of the year. Going over the men's side of things, and no change at the top with Jannik Sinner staying at 1, Zverev at 2 and Alcaraz at 3. Fritz comes in at 4 with Djokovic at 5. Ruud comes in at 6 with Draper at 7. But Tsitsipas, he goes up to number 8 in the world, 2 spots higher than last week, leaving Rublev at number 9. Demonor gets back in the top 10, 1 spot higher than last week. And Medvedev, he drops down 3 spots, falling out of the top 10 completely after having a really poor week this week and not defending the points that he earned from last year. So Medvedev out of the top 10 again, making way for Demonor. Really interesting to see. But kind of like on the women's side, the players sort of from 8 to 12 are so close in the rankings that if you do well, even in just a 500 tournament, we're going to see a lot of changes throughout the clay court season for those guys. Looking over the rest of the finals now, and no change at the top, with Jannik Sinner still at number 1, which is incredible after 3 months of tennis. He won the Australian Open. He's been banned for the last couple of months, and he's still the best player of the season by ranking. Crazy to see. Zverev stays at 2 with Draper at 3. We had massive changes down the bottom with Djokovic going up 5 spots into that number 4 spot after making the final in Miami, pushing Alcaraz down to number 5. Mensik, he goes up 40 spots into that number 6 spot after winning 1,000 points by winning the Miami trophy, pushing Auger-Aliassime down 2 spots to number 7. Shelton down to number 8. Demonor down to number 9. Fritz comes into the top 10 again, up 12 spots from last week. And Runa and Paul get pushed out of the top 10 completely. So this is a little bit more, I guess, to go with the men's side of things, because of course on the women's side, we've had 4 1,000 events in a Grand Slam. On the men's side, we've only had 2 1,000 events and a Grand Slam. So there's still some movement there and maybe some names that we don't expect to be there at the end of the year. But great to see Mensik getting a massive boost in the ranking, because he has been so good this season and he is so dangerous, as he showed in the final in Miami. So there it is, they are the rankings. Really interested to see how the first 3 months of the hardcourt season, and now we have no hardcourt tennis until after Wimbledon. So it's going to be really interesting to see how the players that have done well so far adapt to the clay, because of course the clay court tennis, clay court season starts next week. and we'll see which names can stay in the top 8 for the finals and also in the top 10 in general. But let me know in the comments below. What's the biggest takeaway from Miami this week? I feel like there's been so many things to take away from Miami. Of course, the teenagers doing well on the men and women's side. Djokovic making a final, even though he didn't win the final. Still very impressive for him to make the final of Miami. When's he going to win his title? That's the big question now. You know, Alcaraz and Medvedev not doing very well. Zverev, again, not being able to do much. Maybe some of the upsets. You know, Swiatek on the women's side. Can she recover? Now we're going to the clay. But there it is. They are the rankings. And it's been a very interesting tournament in Miami this week.